How to make a handpaw pattern plus handpaws. So I'm going to draw out my pattern on this thin paper. I'm going to make sure it fits my hand, but overall I'm going to make sure this pattern fits most people's hands. I'm going to fold it in half and cut that out so that it will be symmetrical from side to side. I'm going to draw my paw pads for the fingers and the palm. I'm going to draw my claw and then cut that out. Take another sheet of paper and trace the inner finger and outer finger, cut that out, and then trace that onto some foam. I have it labeled left and right using a heart and a diamond, and this one is the outer finger, so I'm just going to take my scissors and just keep snipping away foam until it's nice and smooth into the shape that I like the top part of the fingers to look like. I refer to my little paper pattern and just keep snipping away until I am happy with the shape. I'm going to do the same for this inner finger piece. I'm going to see how they look on the pattern and just set those aside. I'm going to label my pattern with the hearts and diamonds. And then I'm going to cut out my paw pads for the fingers and the palm. I'm going to transfer this to some better quality paper so that you can keep this pattern and use it for future hand paws. So this is the bottom part of the finger, and I'm going to just trace it onto this cardstock paper and add the seam allowance. I add if it's the heart side or the diamond side. I label one side A side and then I flip it over and label it B side, so that would be the mirrored side. I do that for the inner and outer fingers. Here I am doing the wrist / palm part of the hand paw. I'm adding the seam allowance in the fur direction. I add like a little arrow that shows which way the fur pile should go. I cut out the little paw pad. Here I'm cutting the foam pieces again because I wasn't quite happy with them, so I just snipped them down a little bit more. Now that I'm happy with that shape, I take some masking tape and just take little strips and kind of crisscross them until it's completely covered except the bottom. I snip away any excess around the edge, and then I draw where I want to cut it and add the fur pile direction. I cut it out, I put it onto this paper, and then I cut it out of that paper. So here I am drawing the paw pad all together. You'll see in just a second here. See, yeah, it's a whole paw, and I'm going to cut this out. This will be used for the inner lining. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to trace onto this spandex material. It's kind of hard to draw on this material because it's so slippery and stretchy, and it's also kind of hard to cut out. So I make 4 of these. So there's 2 of these for each hand paw. It'll be a top and a bottom. And I will set these aside for later. So now I took that same pattern that I traced on the spandex, and I'm just going to draw out the fur design on this. So as you see, it's labeled brown and the bottom is white with the fur direction. and I'm just gonna cut the fingers out, and I'm gonna cut where the two different colors meet. This is the top part of the hand paw. I'm going to take the brown part of that and just go ahead and trace it on there with the seam allowance, paying attention to fur direction, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut it out because this fur is going to stay long. And I'm also going to do the same, make another one for the other hand paw. So I should have two of these pieces. I set those aside. This is the top part of the fingers. The fur on the finger is going to be short, so I'm going to like basically trace these out in a block. So I'm taking the both finger patterns and just tracing it one way and flipping it the other, but making enough so that each hand paw has 4 fingers. So here I am tracing again on a separate piece of paper, separating the brown and the white. So this part will be the bottom part of the hand paw. The white part is actually in 2 different sections. Part of it's going to be long and part of it's going to be short. This part is brown, but I want it to be short because I want the palm part to be short. And I'm just going to trace that and cut it out in a little rectangle piece. These 2 pieces also will be shaved down, trace them onto that fur and cut them out in a rectangle piece. These pieces right here are going to stay long, and so I'm just going to cut them out as is. And now I'm going to trace my claw, add the seam allowance. Same thing with the paw pads. This is the bottom part of the fingers. This looks like the outer finger, so I'm going to trace it twice one way and then flip it over and trace it twice the other way. And then this is the inner finger, trace it one way, flip it over, trace it the other way. So there should be 8 of these all together. This is fur that's going to be long, that's white for the top part of the hand paw. So I'm going to go ahead and just trace them and cut those out. Now I'm starting to sew stuff. So this is the top part of the hand paw, the wrist part up to the top of the hand. I'm going to pin it together. This is kind of hard to sew on the sewing machine. I'm going to do a loop stitch all the way. It's a very strong stitch, and I'm using upholstery thread. Upholstery thread is a little more expensive, but it's very strong and I like it. I brush it out, and this is the other. So now I have 2 tops. So now I'm going to start shaving the fur that needs to be shaved. It's just me wearing a respirator and my goggles and just shaving with this pet razor that I got on Amazon. I brush it out and then I give it a little more shave and brush it out and set it aside, and I just do all these little square and rectangle pieces like that. Now that I have all my sheets of fur shaved down, I'm going to start cutting out these pieces. The white pieces are on the palm side of the hand paw, and I'm also doing the brown fur that's on the palm side of the hand paw, and also the top and bottoms of the fingers. My cat came to observe, like he always does. I added darts to these, that's why they look kind of weird. So I'm going to sew up the darts so that these pieces will have that nice cup shape. And I take my scissors and kind of just clean up the seam there. So here I am sewing a white piece of fur that is long to the short white fur that is short. There's like a little section there I had to sew by hand. So now I'm going to attach that white piece that I just sewed together to the brown fur that is the palm part of the paw. I'm going to clip that together, and I'm going to take some upholstery thread and sew that by hand because it's a little awkward to do on the sewing machine, but I'm just going to do a loop stitch across. So now I'm starting to add the finger part for the bottom part of the paw. So I'm just pinning them on, and then I'm doing one at a time, sewing them, making sure I'm pinning the correct finger in order. And then I'm just cleaning up the seam and brushing it out. And now I'm going to start adding my paw pads, and I just clip on the minky to the finger, and then I just sew around where I traced the paw pad. And then I flip it over and I cut off the excess. I'll clean them up later. I do this for all the fingers and the big paw pad. There's a little section there that I had to do by hand because it's just a really awkward little spot. So here I'm stuffing the fingers and the palm. So what I do is the back of this brown fur, I make a slit and I stuff it with the polyfill, and I use some kind of pointy object. I use like a pencil there to shove it in. And then when I get it stuffed to the way I like it, I just hand sew that slit back up. And I do that for all the fingers and the big palm pad. It's just a loop stitch. It still has a bunch of excess, but that will be cleaned up later. For now, they are nice and stuffed. The pile of the minky is facing towards the fingertips. I am now doing the top part of the paw, and I'm adding the cup-like fingers to the top. So once again, making sure that they're in correct order. So here I have my two little pieces for the inner lining, so I'm just sewing them together. I pinned it together and I'm slowly making my way around with the sewing machine, just making a glove out of it. And now I'm going to make my claws. So basically I pin the two pieces of minky together with the pretty side on the inside, and I sew that on the sewing machine, and then I cut out the excess, and that's what it looks like with the inside out. And then I flip it right side out, and this is what a claw looks like. So later I will stuff it with polyfill and clean up the seams. So now I've made 8 claws, so 4 for each hand. I really like the shape of these. These turned out really great. So now I'm taking my little glove that I made and I'm going to pin it onto the bottom part of the paw and sew all the way up the sides of the wrist part. The fingers I'm actually going to sew in just little sections. So the fingers, I do each side of the finger and the tip of the finger. I don't go all the way around, just enough to secure it. So here I am now snipping away the excess of the minky material around the paw pads. So I just have to hold it in a way that exposes that excess material, and I have to cut as close as I can without actually cutting the thread that holds that minky to the paw. So cutting as close as I can without cutting a hole in it. And so that's the bottom of the paw. Nice cleaned up beans. So yeah, I made a little glove and then connect the glove to the bottom part of this paw. Now I take the top part and I'm gonna pin that on. I start with the sides, tucking in the fur because you don't want to sew that, and then I make my way around the fingers. This takes a while, like a long while, longer than you would think, but making sure that the tip of the fingers line up properly and that everything is not shifted in a weird way. So now I'm just gonna sew the sides again. And then the fingers, I'm actually just going to do a loop stitch all the way around. It's really hard to do this on the sewing machine, at least for me, so I'm just going to do this by hand, making sure that each stitch is nice and even from each other. It makes it more secure. I'm using upholstery thread because Handpaws are a part of the fursuit that is moved around a whole lot and you're like moving your fingers, so you definitely want the seams to be nice and secure. So here I'm just time lapse to where I'm finishing up the last finger there. So here I'm struggling to get the fingers to go through. Takes a while, but I eventually get it. Just turn it inside out, and then I take scissors. I hold the scissors together, but I'm just basically trying to pull out any fur that did get in the seams. It helps to hide the seams a little bit better, to just take your scissors and just kind of rub the side of them against all the areas where it's sewn together. And I give it a nice brush. Now I'm going to use the polyfill to stuff the fingers on top of the glove part of the hand paw. I just stick it up in there and fill it to the way I like. So here I have some white cotton material and I fold it over and I pin it down, and I'm just going to sew along the edges so it's just one long strip, and then I'm going to try to fold it over the edge and pin it in place all the way around, and then I try to sew it on the sewing machine. It still doesn't look great, but it's the best attempt I've made so far. Here's a little flap of material left. It's just the edge, so I'm going to sew it down in the corner and then just sew it on the sewing machine. I brush it out, and then now the hand paw is pretty much finished if you want it to not add claws. I like to basically give the fingers a little touch-up shave, not going too hard with it. They don't look as shaggy, and it makes them have more of a defined shape. And now I'm going to stuff my claws to the way I like it, and I'm going to take a little needle and I'm just going to clean up the seam. And then I'm going to start sewing these claws on. I pin it in place, making sure that the base of the claw keeps that nice round shape, and just sewing from the very bottom of the claw all the way around back to the bottom where you started. And then I just clean up around the edge of the claw. I cut around the fur around it a little bit to clean it up. See how it has a nice round shape all the way around? It's not pinched at the end, because if they're pinched at the end, they tend to flop around. And I've done that in the past, so I found this technique. He's getting a little manicure. And then this is the last one. So I start the thread on the claw itself. The way I sew on, I think this is called a ladder stitch. So it's a technique to sew from the outside that will still hide the thread. And I tie it off and I give it a nice brush. I'm going to clean up around the edge of the claw and trim down the fur, and then you just repeat all of these steps for the other hand paw. And there you go. There's some fursuit paws. Yay! These look so good. I'm so happy how they turned out. There's some things about them that I'm not like 100% happy with, but they are better. So the cuffs are still the crappiest part in my opinion, but I am so happy with these claws, and just overall I'm just really happy with these paws. They have these nice plush little beans. This is what they look like from top and bottom, from the side. I can still move my fingers around, but I have to wear these a little differently. So these are made a little bit different, and the pattern is a little bit different. So I have to have my pinky and my ring finger together for these to work. The two middle fingers in the paws only have to have one finger each. It's just how these paws turned out. If you try to put two fingers in the two middle parts, it's just a little too much. So yeah, that's my paws. They look so good, and I'm so happy how they turned out.